There is an imposter among us. And a body in storage? It's red, orange, green, pink? No, it's brown. Wait, I'm brown. I swear, it's not me. I'm one of you guys, I promise. If you guys don't know the online game Among Us, it's basically a game of survival, where you either have to discover the imposter and complete the tasks as crewmates, or kill all the crewmates to win as the imposter. The imposters and crewmates are all distinct colors selected before the game begins. So the only way to discover the imposter is to accuse others. However, those with imposter syndrome will accuse themselves. In a world where we are taught that anything less than perfection is a failure, one can often feel isolated, like an imposter. In a survey conducted with 1,000 people in the US using UCLA's loneliness scale, Gen Zers aged 18 to 22 scored the highest loneliness rate of 48.3 out of 80, making them the loneliest generation. Today, we'll be venting into imposter syndrome. Next, using our detective skills to figure out the key causes. Lastly, ejecting the problem with 3 solutions. First, let's talk about how we can feel like imposters. Especially in such a stressful environment like this activity, one can often feel like an imposter. On May 13, 2020, the Mandarin defines imposter syndrome as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. Let me introduce you to the Asian grading scale. For the Asian grading scale, we have A is average, B is below average, C is can't have dinner, D is don't come home, and F is find a new family. I'm just gonna say my grades during freshman year weren't that good. I was literally on the verge of not having dinner for a week. And it's not just me. Many students experience this phenomenon known as imposter syndrome, where they often feel inadequate regarding their abilities. In a study focusing on 150 academically high-achieving women from universities across the United States, participants described having the feeling of convincing those around them that they were intelligent, while they believed that they were not, calling themselves imposters. The reason why this is so important is because imposter feelings are generally accompanied by mental illnesses. According to the Gurdon Center Treatment Services, these imposter feelings can be strongly linked to anxiety and depression, as the individual never feels able to accept themselves as worthy. They may spiral into a serious depression as they feel they can't reach the level of competence that they want to have. As a way to mask their depression, people tend to humble brag. A term coined by Harris Whittles, humble bragging is a way to disguise a brag of some humility. For example, the other day, my volleyball teammate complained about how horrible her grades were, and when I asked her what her lowest grade was, guess what she said? It was an A-. In all seriousness, she probably felt insecure and was only bragging to get confirmation from others. She's basically fishing for compliments. And I thought trout season started the last week of April. Next, following the effects of imposter syndrome, there are 2 key causes to this problem. I looked around my volleyball team and the huddle that we were in, and I noticed that there was one big difference between me and the other girls. They were perfect. They had the perfect bodies and I didn't. The 2 causes we'll be exploring today are first, social comparison theory, and second, lack of intersectionality. In psychology, the human drive to compare ourselves to others is called the social comparison theory. On March 31st, 2021, positive psychology defines the social comparison theory as comparing ourselves to an unrealistic standard, which results in negative thoughts and behaviors. After comparing myself to my volleyball team, I realized it was super unhealthy and toxic. However, someone decided to take this comparison too far. And that's Ollie London, who didn't like his appearance and wanted to look like K-pop star Jimin from BTS. The problem is, he's white. Plus, he'll never be as talented. Now, let's take a look at intersectionality. In simple terms, intersectionality is a combination of race, class, sex that shapes your life. Many environments are hostile towards certain racial groups and genders. For example, universities are hostile towards women, especially women of color. A survey of graduate enrollment and degrees states how knowing the scrutiny is biased does not necessarily stop us from feeling like imposters. It is important for us to see role models who look like us in school and in the workforce because it gives us a sense of belonging. If students don't have that support, they're more likely to feel like the odd one out. One day, my uncle asked me how I was doing with my classes, and I told him that everyone in my school is so much smarter than me. But then he said to me that I didn't have to worry because a lot of students only boast about their scores, which made me feel a lot better that day. So let's try to make others feel better with 3 solutions to this problem. First, dealing with feelings of imposter syndrome. Next, implementing the muddiest point activity. And finally, to stop comparing yourselves to others. When dealing with feelings of imposter syndrome, psychologist Susan Albert says, first, separate feelings from facts. Take note of your accomplishments and turn imposter syndrome on its head. First, separate feelings from facts. Just because you think that way doesn't mean it's true. Next, take note of your accomplishments. You have already accomplished so much. Make a list, take photos, display your awards, and remind yourself of just how awesome you are and what you've accomplished. And third, turn imposter syndrome on its head. Dr. Albert says, true imposters don't actually experience imposter syndrome. Only smart, high-achieving people do. So just thinking that you're an imposter means that you're actually not. Next, you as educators can help your students when dealing with feelings of imposter syndrome by using the muddiest point activity. This activity is a quick monitoring technique where students are asked to take a few minutes to write down the most difficult or confusing part of a lecture, lesson, or reading. Brown University writes that showing your students it is normal to have some questions or difficulties while learning can be helpful when dealing with feelings of imposter syndrome and creating an inclusive environment. Finally, Bill Gates once said, don't compare yourself with anyone in this world. If you do so, you're just insulting yourself. I learned that from a 4th grader in storytelling. Thereby, the last solution is simple, to stop comparing yourselves to others. There are going to be times when you feel as though the whole world is going on ahead and leaving you behind, but let me tell you this, you are not alone, so don't be afraid. Today, we learned what imposter syndrome is, and if you already knew what it was before, keep your mouth shut. You don't want to be the next one joining Brown, do you? First, we vented into imposter syndrome, which makes people feel like a fraud, rendering them unable to recognize, let alone celebrate their achievements. Next, we use our detective skills to figure out the key causes, social comparison theory, and lack of intersectionality, before lastly, ejecting the problem with 3 solutions. Now understand that all of us think we are sus. We should think of ourselves as crewmates, people who are working together to finish up their tasks in life. Don't be that person in Among Us who votes themselves out to be ejected. You belong on the ship. Your contribution matters. You matter. So chin up, Brown. You got this.